Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Relo, the voice of the relocation industry. I'm your host, Ben Cross, and I'm super blessed and honored to be here with my friend, Kim Krollman, EVP, Strategic Solutions at Owl Rentals. Kim, how are you doing?
I'm great, Ben. How are you today?
I am fantastic. I'll tell you what, not only do I consider you a friend, I consider you to have the best map in the business. I love this map. I'm kind of an art guy. I'm working on my art game a little bit, but I love your map back there.
You have never made me look at this map the same again after you told me it looked like the COVID vaccination map.
I thought it was a COVID hotspot map. Is it not?
It is not. It's a cross between sort of Jackson Pollock and a 2-year-old splash art. But
I
it's
thought it
cool.
was like Owl's service area on mushrooms. I
Yeah.
didn't know what I was looking at. No, I
Yeah.
love it. No, honestly, all kidding aside, I do. I love the colors. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now, Kim, where in the world are you right now?
I am in Gilbert, Arizona, in the East Valley of Phoenix, in about 96-degree heat today.
Dang, it's too early for 96-degree heat.
Certainly is. I think by Wednesday it was supposed to be about 99. I think it's going to get really hot really quickly here.
How hot? Okay, I want to shout out everybody that's watching right now. Keep coming in. Hit that like button. It lets everybody know that we're live. Do that first. Second thing, we got homework here. Okay, you can't just come in here and snooze, check email. Also, for all the people that are watching right now, I want to know who you are, where you're at. Shout out your company. Give me a heat check. I want to know what the temp is, where you're at right now. I want to know. I'm very curious because I'm in Texas. I'm freaking out. It's April. So it's like 75, which is beautiful, but it's about to be 95 soon. How hot does it get in Gilbert, Arizona, Kim?
Well, last summer was, I've been down here for 8 years, and last summer was by far the worst. We had something like 110 days over 115. It was insane last summer. But I would say,
115.
yeah, a normal summer. Well, they shut down the airport at 122, I think, because the wheels start to melt on the airplanes. But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, for the most part, it's not so bad. I work from home, so I don't have to go out in it very often, except to jump in the pool after dinner. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy hot.
I feel like Elon Musk is onto something with this going to Mars thing. Like, I tell you what, 122 degrees, airports are shut down.
Yeah.
Crazy, crazy, crazy. We're gonna talk about corporate housing. We're gonna talk about Owl. We're gonna talk about you, Kim, what your journey's like. We got people coming in the comments here. I want to check in with them as well. Super excited to have you here. And also, everybody that's watching, check this out. We've got these Love and Relo vacuum sealed tumblers. This is like the good stuff. It's not Yeti. Okay. Money's got to go to charity. We need margins. But it's good stuff. It's like vacuum sealed, stainless. It's got the move for hunger. It's got the Love and Relo. Check out it's scrolling. Wait, maybe it's going the other way. moveforhunger.org/Tumblr. 100% of the money that you spend on these goes to Move for Hunger. So go ahead and get one, get two, get three. Christmas is right around the corner or something. Check that out. Keeps your drinks cold in 122-degree weather. We got people checking in. Stacy Huff, what's up, super producer Stacy in the house? Appreciate you. Vivi Hamel, hey, what's up, Vivi? Hello from London.
Hey,
Shout out to
Vivi.
Vivi. Yeah, Vivi's in the house from Malta Vita. What's up, Viv? Tom Brune, hey, Kim and Ben from NEO and sunny Denver. Tom, what's the temp out there in Denver? Let me know. Phil Leonard, Philip, hi, Kim. Good to see you. Joanne, hi, Kim checking in. Tim Quirk from Western New York was wondering about OWL, all caps. Does that stand for something? Hey, good question,
It
Tim.
does. Great question, Tim. Thank you for asking. It stands for Options Without Limits. And we were very wise in the decision of picking OWL.
I see what you did there. What's the story though? It's a cool acronym, but I mean, tell us
So,
why. Tell us why Options Without Limits. Tell us why OWL.
so OWL was created about 4 years ago as a vision to really be a supplier to supplier network. And probably last June, July time, we took it out to the marketplace for all the temp living supplies in the US and Canada. So the way it works today is it is a marketplace where one supplier has a request in another city, so let's say Chicago to San Diego, they fill out the request form online. That request is sent directly to all the suppliers in San Diego. They respond back with their options within minutes because it has mobile capabilities. And once those options come back, the supplier in Chicago picks which one they want. It creates a presentation page that they can send to their client. And there's a communication that goes on within the system to connect the two suppliers together. The reason that it's a marketplace rather than a platform as we know it today is that OWL really is the vessel to connect the suppliers, or in this case now the clients and RMCs to the other suppliers, with the intent of really looking into the future to make it more than just about temp living. So perhaps down the line, adding things like furniture rental or unfurnished rentals. It's a true bolt-on kind of technology that we're really, really proud of. That's it's going really gangbusters. We have almost 300 suppliers on it now, just since June. So it's been a real journey since June. So I'm really happy to be part of it. It's quite exciting, really.
Yeah, and I want to talk about platforms. I want to talk about technology. I want to talk about the evolution of corporate housing, kind of where it's been and where it is going. Also want to check in. Look, we got Jack and Philly here. Philly in the house. What's up, Jack? Vinny, look at this. Jack, go ahead and shout out your clubhouse rooms. Anything you got coming up too? Put that in the comments as well. Gabriel Brown. Hi, Kim. I'm in Arizona as well. Feel the heat. Way too early for Arizona.
Way too early. I agree, Gabriel. Way too early.
Gosh, 66 degrees. Philip is that's nice. I can deal with that. Lynn in San Diego. Lisa Ross, gorgeous in San Diego. That's beautiful. Ventura. Callie's in the house. Big right here. This is great. Let's see. Vinny, the Tumblr is amazing. Check my little video on LinkedIn. Yes. Vinny does an amazing little boomerang video there. Awesome. Valerie, love Al Reynolds Platform Deluxe checking in.
Hey, Valerie. Thank you.
That's cool. That's great. We got people checking in all over the places. Great. Maria's in the house. Sean, I love your questions. Throw them in the comments there. We're going to ask a lot of questions here of Kim, Maria, Sean, Joan. Throw them in there. Cindy. What's up, Cindy? How's it going? Good to see Cindy. Kelly Guerin in the house as well from Arizona, I think. Tom Broom. Temps in the 70s in Denver. We got the Netherlands.
Oh, hey, Yolanda.
Fantastic. Jill from Arizona. Jill, I can't get used to you being in Arizona. Love it. It's fantastic. All right. Throw your comments in there and your questions. I'd love to see those as well there. Luke Douglas checking in 79 degrees. Jackie just got her tumbler. Don't forget to get these tumblers. It all goes to charity. Okay. Without further ado. So, Kim, tell us really quick for people maybe that aren't familiar with you. Tell us about your kind of journey getting into global mobility.
Well, it's somewhat an amusing story, actually. I came over here from England many years ago to be a nanny for 6 months. And the woman that I was working for as a nanny was also a flight attendant and working with a flight attendant who owned a temp living company. So I ended up working for this woman who is actually still in business in Chicago. And I worked for her for a couple of years. So I sort of fell into it. From there, I worked in the Chicago market for, about 16, 17 years. And then I was with Marriott for a couple of years. I opened a building in Chicago for them for Executive Stay. And then I was with Oakwood as a regional manager, working with the UK team, and all of the Midwest teams reported up to me. And then from there, rather than just sort of regular corporate sales, I went with Oakwood to working on the relo side and working with all the RMCs and managing a small team there on the RMC side. And then, years in temp living and opening a couple of offices for another company a few years ago out in London. And here I am today now working for Alex and the OWL technology. So it's been an interesting journey. I think I'm just like everybody else, Ben. It's never one thing that I woke up and thought, I want to be a mobility professional. I think it was never
Yeah.
on my radar. I mean, I don't
Well,
even know.
I love how it starts with being a nanny,
A
and
nanny.
then I mean I don't know. I'm not going to say anything, but I mean it seems like maybe you overstayed your visa a little bit or something. I'm not sure exactly how it
Yeah,
works out.
luckily, it was in the 80s, and luckily I got married. So that sort of saved me from a mess that I would have found myself in today. But yeah, I
That's
wasn't a
great.
very good nanny. I will say I like my children, but I'm not necessarily, I was not necessarily the best nanny. I mean, I was 21, it was a
Yeah,
long time ago.
seriously,
But
that's
I
great.
suppose I couldn't have been that bad because the family is still very close to me and my family. They're like my mother and my stepbrother is what I would call them. So yeah, it was. I guess in the end it worked out well. But had I not got into mobility, I'm not sure that could have ended well. All right.
Yeah, and I want to know how corporate housing has changed. I mean, you've worked at so many really cool places
Mm-hmm.
and kind of been at the forefront of this industry in a lot of your roles, and you've done a lot of different things. And before you get that, I want to debunk a myth. Richard says, "Is this live? I can't work out or recording." Yes, Richard, it's live. Thank you for being here. Keep your questions coming. Okay, let's see if we can't do just a hair better. All right, Kim. No, but tell us how the industry has evolved.
Oh
Um,
my
since
Ben. I
you-
mean, it is worlds different than obviously it was 10 years ago, let alone.
walk us through the evolution, if you would. Just help me
Yeah,
out.
I think when I first got into this business, it was an entirely different world. It's not recognizable to where it is today. I mean, we had very few options for temporary housing to begin with. Normally, everything was master leased. All the temp living companies, I mean, all of them, there were maybe a dozen nationwide and very few globally. Um, they had master leases. They had 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 master leases that was quite easy to keep full, really, because there was no competition, right? I remember back years ago, I opened a building in Chicago, took it out of construction, which it's a 2,600 unit building. It's an enormous building in Chicago, and we had 750 furnished units in about 3 years. It was just amazing, but it was also at a time where, there's a big tower in Chicago that is now called something that it shouldn't be called, but we won't get into that. So the company that had the name on the tower had their offices in that building as well. So we took a ton of that business into this location, and we would get calls on a daily basis from the HR team saying, we have somebody coming in and his wife really likes traditional furniture or an Asian style furniture or modern furniture. And we would just furnish it however somebody wanted it. I mean, those are long, long gone. They had no budgets. It was because again, at that time you were moving because you were getting promoted, right? So that was going back that far. That was really the only reason that people
What
moved.
was it all like? Was it a different class of transferee? I mean, was it just
Mhm.
a different level? And were
Oh,
budgets? I
very
mean,
much
were
so.
budgets just totally different?
There were no budgets. There were no budgets. I mean, this is going back, 25 plus years, but yeah, there were no budgets. I mean, everybody got what they wanted because, again, they were getting promoted and people wanted them to move to this location. So they would give them anything that they wanted, really. And then, of course, going through a couple of economic downturns that changed. And I would say two things changed along the way. One, people needed to start moving people globally, which they had never done before, and moving them from the US to other countries and having the US take care of that move rather than the destination country in Europe or Asia or Latin America. So that was a change in the industry.
I want to hear really quick about. I want to ask you about that. When did you notice that change to more international, and when did you notice that they were centralizing mobility decisions and operations, say in the United States?
Um, I would say probably about 20 years ago, the trend started to do that. I mean, up until that point, most of the US companies, if they had somebody moving to Paris or London and they had an office in Europe, they would just call up that HR person in London or Paris and say, this person is moving, can you take care of them? But I would say about 20 years ago, and I'm thinking back to sort of when we opened the Oakwood office in the UK, that was probably 25 years ago, maybe that one was, so quite a long time. But even then, when we first opened that office over there, the majority of the business was London to London or Europe to London. It wasn't US to London or Europe. And I think that sort of came as a progression when people started to really understand what it meant from the tax perspective. You know, back in those days, there were no rules. So, I mean, and everything was really a manual system to a great degree as well. So there was no tracking involved and no TOMs, no, you know, we didn't really care about the VAT going from the US to Europe. It was an entirely different situation. So I think that was a massive shift in the industry. And then obviously more recently, after sort of the 2008, 2000, well, even 2001, 2008, 2009, those critical parts of the US economic situation, the entire demographic of who we were moving changed.
So, I want to talk about this, right? Because these are what I remember, right? 2001, 9/11, 2008, financial crisis.
Yeah.
How did those two events, out of curiosity, I mean, what is your take on that? How did those two events shape global mobility, temp housing? How did that change?
I think by 2008, we had learned a lot from 2001. I mean, 2001 about killed the industry because no one was moving. Everyone was afraid to move. And then once you started to sort of emerge from that a little bit, we found that like a spouse would move, but the family may stay because they were just too nervous and they didn't know what was happening, which then sort of translated into the 2008 financial crash where they didn't want to sell a house because they didn't know if they were still going to be employed. So that, and the demographic of who we were moving after 2008 and 2009 drastically changed because no longer were people, even after 9/11, people weren't moving necessarily for promotions. They were moving because either you moved or you didn't have a job. So the emotional part of the move became very, very different. Back before 2001, before 9/11, it was usually a pretty joyous time if you were moving because, again, most of the people were either getting new jobs or they were being promoted or it was a move that they wanted. But after those two critical events, people were moving because they had to. And that left spouses that weren't happy about it, kids that weren't happy about it. So throughout the entire mobility process, I think that, you know, every part of a mobility move is important, right? Whether it's the tax and legal or the appraisers or the real estate people or the household goods. But the temp living piece and the destination service piece are the ones that really touch the person emotionally. You know, if you have a very unhappy wife or husband that doesn't want to make this move and you have to, then it all lands on the temp living people to sort of make sure that they're all happy and content and not stressed out and that the move goes well. Otherwise, it's a miserable experience for the transferee.
Yeah, and I love everything you're saying. This is so fascinating. And I'd love to encourage the people watching right now to leave your comments and your questions in there as well as you're listening to Kim. What does that make you think about? Things that you've seen in the past, what does it make you think about? I want to talk a little bit about these. You know, you bring up 01, you bring up 08. Here we are in global pandemic, every bit the crisis of those two as well.
Yeah, for sure.
What have you learned from 01 and 08 that helps you and could help us maybe prepare for what we're going through and how we come out of this? What were the takeaways of the lessons that maybe shaped you and shaped the business coming out of that may be applicable today?
Well, I think there's several things, right? There's the transferee piece, which is the emotional piece, but then there's the business side of it. So after 9/11, I can't think of very many temp living companies that still have master leases. It then became a great business reason to rent from other corporate housing suppliers, which had never happened before. I mean, we would never have thought about renting from our competitors in the late 90s or the 2000. That didn't really start until after 9/11 when we as an industry weren't willing to take that risk either. So if I'm sitting in Phoenix and I need something in New York, I'm not going to take that risk of setting up my own unit or my own office. I mean, I think back to my, my early days at Oakwood. We had 34 offices across the country, just across the US. So that, oh, thank you. 1997, London. Well done. Tony was one of the first there. It was an entirely different, we had to shift the way we were doing business as an industry after 9/11. And then certainly that sort of prepped us even more for 2008, 2009. Now, I think the downside of what that has done, I mean, there's certainly the upside, right? We didn't have the risk, we didn't have the exposure, we could rent from each other. There was a lot of a really good competition that worked well in a relationship together. But I think where we found ourselves today in a lot of cases is that smaller temp living companies, their largest clients are other temp living companies. So that, that going through this pandemic, for an example, has hurt the industry quite a lot because, again, people aren't moving because they couldn't even leave home last year, right? So that cut the legs off the business. And then you've got suppliers that are really trying to sort of make themselves, to Phil's point, to reinvent themselves as something that it makes more sense coming out of this now. And then you add on to that the technology platforms that are sort of more aggregator in nature. Then it's just, if the entire industry is not even recognizable than it was in the 90s, let alone the 80s.
It's funny. So Philip Leonard here says those events force the industry to reinvent itself. You talk about having all these master leases back then, and then flash forward, 20 years, and I think you correctly observe, right, that most temp housing companies' biggest customers are the temp housing companies. So the paradigm is totally shifted. It's the other way now. And so now taking those kind of two lessons, and I'd love to hear more comments here about this too. We got a ton of people watching on LinkedIn, a bunch on Facebook as well. I'm loving this look back, because I think we can learn so much about what's going to happen based on what has happened, right? And so now here we are in 2020, 2021, 20 years after 9/11, right? Huge shift in the way that the industry has done business and has reinvented itself. How has this pandemic affected temporary housing companies, and what are the longer lasting maybe trends and effects going to be?
Well, it's funny actually, Ben, because I think that coming out of this pandemic, what we have found is almost a little bit switched back to the original concept, because once the big players got into the market, and they were regional and then global, and we all know who those players are and were, and some are still around and some are not, then we sort of lost that personal touch within the industry. But what I feel I see now, which I think is part of what OWL helps to foster, is those personal relationships, and those smaller temp living companies can offer much higher levels of service because their overheads are much less than these big guys are, right? So I think I'm seeing a shift backwards slightly in that the clients now are looking for more high touch and much more personalized service. The flip side of that, obviously, is that where it hasn't completely come full circle yet, is that the budgets are there, and people, they don't have the money to spend, but yet their expectation of the service levels are even higher than they've ever been before, because you've got duty of care, and you've got all the CDC stuff that we have to follow, and we just have to make sure that everybody's in compliance with that. So I think we're halfway back to where we used to be. I don't think we'll ever get to another master lease sort of situation in the industry. I don't think that really makes sense. But yeah, it's been quite interesting to see. And obviously now we're starting to get some traction back in the industry. I mean, with OWL, we went live in June, and we've run over 15,000 requests since June through the network. So, there's definitely some upward movement there. I would imagine that it's not going to get back to where it was in 2019 until 2022. But, I have no crystal ball, so I'm not, I'm not. That's just my personal prediction after being doing this for so long.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear viewers out there. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your predictions for temp housing and where it's going. We've got a couple comments here as well. But so what I hear is there, you might see a shift going back into folks having their own inventory and kind of maybe an emphasis on operators, maybe kind of a bifurcation of the industry where you have the bookers and you have the operators, and maybe kind of less of maybe the hybrid role where the bookers are really more platform aggregator, marketplace, whatever you want to kind of call it, front end bookers, client relationships, sourcing tools, and then you have you have folks that are actually operating with a little more maybe clarity and transparency around who does what in the process.
The transparency is a critical piece. I mean, it's the way that we have built out the OWL network, because there is no possible way to demonstrate the cost savings that the clients are demanding post-COVID without looking at the transparency factor. So, I mean, historically in the past 10, 15 years, a temp living provider would reach out to another one, who would reach out to another one, who may even reach out to a fourth one. And then by the time that first temp living provider has got the options back, it's layered on layered on layered on layered. And then you pass that off to the client. So I think there's a need in the industry now to sort of peel away on that layering and just be able to work with two entities that do have core inventory, that are not going to be calling. If you're in Detroit, you're not going to be calling somebody in Columbus to set up something for you and then give you the price, then give me the price, right? I think we're going to have to be able to give our clients, and whether it's a corporate client or an RMC, we're going to have to be able to give those clients better data around that and demonstrate the cost savings around that in order to be successful moving forward in this industry. And that's, I think, to Phil's point, that's part of the reinvention of the industry overall, right? I think that we have to sort of take a hard look at what we've been doing and turn it on its head. I mean, we can't continue down the road we were previously. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, this is great, and I want to read some of these comments here, and I want maybe you and I can kind of weigh in on what we think about some of these comments and predictions and things like this. We got friends checking in here. Jill Parteka, hello from Deluxe Suites. What's up, Jilly? Love you, girl. Brad Hamlin, hey, Ben and Kim. Shout out from Relocation America International. Look at Brad. Brad's amazing. Jack Jam Pell, beginning April 13th, every Tuesday, 11 a.m., bringing my LinkedIn Other Side of the Coin blog to Clubhouse. Discuss those mobility topics that we are normally uncomfortable talking about. I think layering in corporate housing, Jack, should be on the docket.
Mm-hmm.
Invite Kim, invite me. I think there's a few folks out there who would love to talk about that.
Yeah, I agree, Jack. It's a very, very sensitive and in a lot of cases uncomfortable conversation. But in fairness to the industry, we just have to have it. Otherwise, we're doing ourselves an enormous disservice if we can't figure this out, because the clients are going to demand that we bring the cost down and increase the service levels like never before.
Yeah, Jack. So think about that one, Jack. Love to hear your thoughts on it from a client standpoint as well. Corporate housing. Veronica checking in. Good to see you, Veronica. Richard, thank you so much for the support. Aziz checking in from London. Let's see here. Cole checking in. Richard says, do you think smaller companies are also flexible to move with trends faster? Seems most significant casualties have been with larger companies of late.
Yeah, that's a great question, Richard. I think that the larger companies have been more visible in their struggles. But I think that there are a ton of really good, really, really solid small ones that actually depended on those large companies' business that are struggling today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it moves, these move in cycles. I think you kind of described that, right, with the ebbs and the flows, right? And I think now we're actually going to move away from large companies dominating things with a few large companies booking everything and sourcing everything to a lot more fragmented things, with a lot more disintermediation in the business, where you're actually dealing with the operators. And I think there's going to be a greater financial incentive for operators, which is going to be really neat. So and a lot less margin on the booking side, which is good for new players and not good for all legacy providers that have large bloated infrastructure, frankly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that we still have some great, very large, very successful providers out there, and they've done a fabulous job of getting themselves through this pandemic, and, more power to them. But, and the two that I have in mind, I mean, they've increased, they've changed, they've really pivoted, they've bought some companies, they've changed their portfolio, they've done a whole bunch of different things. But I still think that, at the end of the day, there's room for everybody in this marketplace. The big ones need the little ones, and the little ones need the big ones, because the big ones, let's face it, they have the ins with the clients. But to get back to the layering piece, you need to be able to identify that layering, even if you're the big guy. I mean, what we've seen from the OWL side is that a lot of the clients, and even some of the temp living providers, didn't realize that they were paying a layered cost. And we've been able to identify that, and it's blatantly obvious when you see the network that who is layering and who is not. So I think that we'll see more and more of that in going to that sort of exposure, where the big guys will only rent from one specific temp living provider in a specific market, and they will make sure that that cost is not layered. Because it's all about, for the client, it's going to be all about the cost.
Yeah, very interesting. Sarah Buck checking in from New England. Snowy April. Wow, being adaptive up there in the snowy April. What's up, Sarah? Good to see you. Sarah says she would say smaller companies are more flexible. I would agree. Let's see here.
I don't know about flexible, Richard, but they're more willing. They're certainly more willing, because they need to be able to do that, right? I mean, they need to be able to change.
Yeah. I mean, think about this, for just to go back to Richard. Let's just debate this for a second, or maybe not debate, but let's go into this for a second. I think it's more. I'm getting text messages from people like, read my comments. You guys, I promise I will, but you also have to stay tuned. It's an hour show, okay, guys? I'm really trying to make people wait for the good stuff here. Hit those like those comments. If you see comments down there that you like or you agree with, or maybe you don't even, throw a little reaction on those comments over there, so it'll help me understand what I need to get to next. But I mean, I think once you build infrastructure around processes, and that means hiring people, that means systems, that means investment, that means leases, that means owning furniture. I mean, whatever that means, infrastructure. All of a sudden your nimbleness kind of goes away.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And so, I mean, I think, so interesting. Malcolm Gladwell, talked about David and Goliath in one of his books. They wrote, gosh, man, it was 10 years ago, and how David actually had a big advantage over Goliath, because Goliath was wearing all this armor. And while he looked at outset much more physically imposing, ready for battle, et cetera, he talked about how he probably couldn't see, he couldn't move very fast, and I think that we're seeing what's happening to corporate housing companies that are built like that. And it's almost kind of like death by a thousand cuts, and they turn around and they're like, gosh, I can't afford this payroll and stuff. And it's tough.
I agree with you, Ben. And I think what happens, and I saw this, I've certainly seen this in my career with one of my former employers, but and I think with a couple that are no longer with us anymore, to that comment earlier, I think that you hit a certain threshold, whether it's head count of employees or unit count or whatever that is, that you have to flip a switch, and either you are in this industry to make money, which we should all be in this industry to do, or you're in this industry to make money and service the client well. But there's a threshold that once you pass that threshold, it's very difficult to do both well. And I think
Yeah.
that's what happened to, a couple of them that aren't around anymore, is that their overhead became so ridiculously out of whack, that you just couldn't, it wasn't worth it anymore. And then the service levels drop, then the clients aren't getting the attention, and the reason the client came to you in the first place is no longer there. So, and on it goes.
This is great. Okay, this is great. I'm gonna get some of these comments here so people can stop sending these hate texts. I'm getting hate texted over here, Kim. People want me to read these comments. Okay, they're all good though. They're all good. All right. So Brad says shift of oversight of RMCs from HR to corporate purchasing has had a huge impact on relocation, and the transfer experience service has declined.
So true, Brad. Yeah, so true. Yeah, and I think that I was involved.
How do you interpret what Brad's saying? How do you interpret what Brad's saying here, Kim?
I interpret that, and there's I have an example of that. A few years ago, I was involved in a very large RFP with an energy company, and the energy company's procurement division was trying to run this RFP, and there was no possible way that what any temp living company was proposing was going to match what the procurement team needed. So the actual fulfillment team, which was an HR organization that was part of this energy company, they stepped in and said, look, we understand the need to save the cost. We get that, but we cannot do that at the loss of the service. And definitely, I think RMCs are seeing that as well in a lot of cases. And the procurement people serve a purpose, but the procurement people don't necessarily understand that emotional part of temp living. They see it as a commodity, where it's really a service of dealing with the human aspect of a move.
Right. And Brad goes on to say corporate clients want less luxury and more moderately priced units. But how do you articulate service? I mean, I always hear that, right? I hear it in household goods, I hear it in corporate, corporate housing, I hear it in immigration, I hear it, oh, we give better service. Well, like, what does that mean to me? How do we as salespeople and people who are trying to communicate these things to our clients to help them make better decisions? How do we actually paint that picture for them?
I don't know. I think we should probably offer every procurement department a free move and see how they like it with or without service, right?
Yeah. And in a strange turn of events, I need you to drop the armoire on this one.
Your lockbox won't work. Those types of things, right?
Oh my gosh, that's great. Let's see here. We got some great comments coming up here. I feel the same way in our industry and forecasting for 2022.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, Tony's saying transparency is key. Clients are looking for less layering and high touch. Interesting. And it is about connecting, I think, the providers who are actually performing the service and eliminating as many middle parties as possible, because that also creates a hindrance to service, right?
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Now, Richard has a question. This is the question of the day here. Richard just taking the softball and just right up the middle with it.
Okay, so let me explain this for the people that, Richard, I'm so sorry. I should have explained this at the beginning when we started talking about this. So this is what layering is if I need an apartment in Columbus, Ohio, and I want to pay $100, which is ridiculously cheap. So I reach out to my supply chain, which doesn't have anyone in Columbus, but has somebody in Chicago. So the person in Chicago would reach out to a supplier in Columbus. That supplier in Columbus would give the supplier in Chicago a price. So let's say it's $99 or $90. Then the provider in Chicago would add a layer on it to give it back to me. So now we're at $100 back to me. But then I also have to mark it up to my client in order to make a profit. Did I explain that right? Was that clear, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, everybody that touches it makes a profit, and it's margin on margin. A lot of times it's percentage, so you have a multiplier effect, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm doing 10%, they're doing 10%, they're doing 10%, they're doing 10%, 10% to 10%, 110% of 10% is 11%. So now the next one's 11%. All right. And it's just, there's a multiplicative effect here that I think people need to understand. And it's one of the reasons they say, the law of interest, right, is so powerful.
Yeah.
Veronica's saying, Richard, layering, I understand to be everyone adding their margin on top of original price quoted by the corporate housing provider who actually manages the accommodation. Yeah, not to mention, the RMC puts piece on top as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers of cost in there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, and you're right, but everybody wants to make money. So what within the OWL network, when a client receives the options, they have a description of the property along with the price. So you can see if I've offered a certain price for an apartment and someone else has offered that same apartment at a higher price because it's in the description, right? You can tell it's exactly the same apartment. So that would be layering, right? So in that case, I would assume that they would rent it with my corporate housing company rather than the one that's charging $30 a day more.
Sarah Buck says, so why don't the larger TMCs go direct to the smaller providers? What is holding them back? What can we do? Define TMCs for us, please, if you don't mind as well.
Travel management company, I think, is what Sarah means.
I think so too.
Yeah. Well, I think, Sarah, the simple answer to that, and it may not be as simple as I'm going to say, but if you go direct to a smaller provider, you have to go through, you'd have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds in your supply chain. As I said, at the beginning of this, we have over 300 suppliers on the OWL network alone. It's less time consuming if you don't try to find all those suppliers yourself. And if you go through a platform or a network, you just have to really be aware of what you're getting, I think. And again, what we have found in rolling out this technology that we have is that a lot of temp living suppliers, travel management companies, and RMCs didn't even realize that they were paying layered cost, So it's, it's a sort of a slam dunk for them at this point.
All right, let's see here. We got some other great comments coming in here as well as all these text messages from people just telling me, read my comment. Okay, I got you. Oh my goodness gracious. Not yet. Tom Bruin, Kim, do you feel that with even more necessity for duty of care that the idea of using Airbnb as a corporate temporary housing solution has finally lost its cachet?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Let's be honest, Kim. Let's be honest to Tom, right? Tom's trying to throw us a softball, but it's got a curve on it, Tom.
Yeah, I would think that, yes, to a great degree, it has. Honestly, Tom, in my career, I have not found very many corporate clients or specifically RMCs that would allow a temp living company to reach out to Airbnb or VRBO or whatever it's called today, Verbo, which is the same as VRBO, right? Because you just can't control standards, and you can't control quality, and you can't control duty of care, frankly. So yeah, I think that it depends. I actually, a few years ago now, I had a business trip to Houston, and I don't know if you guys travel to Houston a lot, but the hotels in Houston are ridiculously expensive, especially around the energy corridor. So I was traveling with two other people. We decided to rent an Airbnb just to check it out. Photos looked great. The location was perfect. Oh my Lord. It was like walking into a house of horrors. There were dirty clothes in all of the closets. There was somebody's motorcycle helmet on my bed. It was just a nightmare. Everyone else had arrived before me. I got there about 11 o'clock at night. That night I slept on top of the bed and said the next morning, we are not staying here again. I don't care how much the hotels are, we're not staying.
I agree. I stayed in Airbnb when I went to Hollywood, actually, I went to the Grammys a few years ago, and I remember I got an Airbnb because I was broke. I got an Airbnb. The guy also had a motorcycle for some reason, not secular. Maybe it was the same guy. maybe he just manages properties all over the United States and leaves a motorcycle helmet in case you want to go have some fun. But I also did not sleep under the covers. I remember that there's something about it. You're like, I don't think this guy washed these sheets. I just don't. I just don't. I don't get the wash sheets vibe from this place.
No, I will say, I mean, I stay in VRBOs and Airbnbs like on the beach. You know, if you go to like a Florida Airbnb, I think it's probably fine for a couple of days because they're usually managed by a whole different network of people than a private owner. But I just think that it's a dodgy concept for transferees unless you I mean, if you're in sort of like Moose Jaw, Canada, you may not have a choice but to go with that kind of a situation.
Shout out to Moose Jaw, most underserved Canadian city on the show today. But Tom, I will say this though, Tom, honestly, yeah. Has it lost its cachet? Yeah. With people that know better, yeah. But you know what, Tom? We've lost our control as an industry because I don't believe that the use of Airbnb is declining. I probably would bet on it increasing because so many people are using lump sum now.
Yeah.
And people are having experiences like Kim described. People are having experiences like Ben described. Tom, you know the deal. Everybody that watches the show knows the deal. People watching the show are not the problem, unfortunately. The problem is that there are not enough people who are informed, who are taking the time and duty of care seriously enough. And a lot of them are saying, listen, I don't have a duty of care if I don't have a policy. And I just say, here's a lump sum, here's some cash, go figure it out. You know, so I think first and foremost, we need to encourage people to have policies around travel, around relocation, around short-term, long-term. We have to do a better job with that and advocating for that. And telling these stories like Kim told, like I told, like Tom asking these questions, I think is great. Before I get killed, I need to make sure I get to the rest of these comments here. I've got a duty of care to ask these questions. Brad Hamlin, the ability to source from small regional temp living companies where they are on equal footing with large companies is what makes OWL unique and allows us to truly eliminate stacking like never before. Shout out, Brad. Love you, man.
Thanks, Brad.
What do you think about Brad's comment? And Brad, please send your Venmo handle so that Kim can wire you some money for that comment.
Yeah, it's on my list right after the show. I mean, I think he's right. I think we need to have sort of open dialogue and an open visibility to everybody that's out there in the temp living arena. I mean, you know, there are lots and lots of clients and RMCs and even other temp living providers that have their own very small supply chain that they've used forever, but they're not necessarily aware that there's anybody else in those markets, or even that supplier is no longer in that market and is renting for somebody else. So a marketplace and a network such as OWL allows that entire visibility to be at the touch of a keystroke for anybody that's using it. So, you know, I think that's absolutely right. The elimination, that layering piece, again, is just going to be critical to pull us out of this as an industry.
Yeah, good stuff there. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate the comment here. Man, we got some great stuff around the Airbnb comment. You really kicked the hornet's nest with that one.
No.
That's fantastic. I love it. Let's see here. We got Larry, a road service. Yeah, that's great. How about this? Right. Cindy Salter, shout out to Cindy. All the RMCs that I know of will not allow Airbnb. Too much liability.
Mm-hmm.
But how does it keep happening? Richard says, but corporates are using Airbnbs and VRBOs, especially for relocation. And I would possibly say increasingly and book through specialist agents, certainly in London. So what's the disconnect here? We have RMCs saying RMCs don't use it. We have corporate housing experts saying, yeah, but I think it's actually increasing.
Yeah, I think Cindy's right. A lot of the RMCs, most that I know, would not use it for a policy type move. But to your point, Ben, if it's a lump sum, you know, they have no control over it. But yet I'm not sure, and probably Elizabeth Soley would be a better person to answer this question, but I'm not sure that eliminates the liability for the corporate client or the RMC if something happens in an Airbnb to a lump sum person. It may, I don't know. But I guess I would ask Richard on that specialist agents if they're the ones managing the Airbnbs, because that's different, right? Like when I've rented down on the Gulf Coast of Florida, the Airbnb that I rented, talk about layering. I'm not quite sure how this happened, but somewhere in that Airbnb, or I think it was VRBO that I rented it from, Mainsail was involved in that. Now, and I don't remember how, but it was like a 3-layer process, and Mainsail, I saw their name on some paperwork. So that gave me a sense of comfort because I know that they would manage that product well, and you're not renting it directly from an owner. So I don't know if Richard is referring to agents who are managing properties for owners throughout London. It could be.
Janet's chiming in. I've had great experiences with Airbnbs. Hey, I've had great experiences with U-Hauls, Janet. Maybe that's just what we should do.
One, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think U-Hauls are fantastic, Janet. How's that sound? You know me. I gotta troll I troll my friends. I actually make T-shirts. I troll my friends. Jack Jampel, companies that provide lump sum don't care about duty of care. So why do we care? How would you interpret this question? Yeah.
Oh, sure, Jack. Companies that provide lump sum don't care about duty of care, so why do we care? Well, we care because we should care. I mean, these are human beings, whether they're a lump sum person or they're somebody that has a fabulous policy. I mean, they still need to be moved comfortably and safely. Is that what you mean, Jack? I'm not quite sure.
I think Jack's saying, well, if I don't care so much, how come you're talking about it? Guys, listen, okay, you can't just care about people when they need a new hip, Jack. Okay? I'm just kidding, Jack. Let's talk about this on the other side of the coin, though, because I'd love to. I think your show, Jack, is the perfect platform for us to have the back and forth, right? To have the plus, it's private, it's not documented, whatever. We can say whatever we want. You can have a two-way conversation. So, Jack, let's get a conversation around corporate housing going, if you don't mind. If we can get on your schedule, I'd love it. That'd be awesome. Let's see here. Sarah Buck says, Richard, yes, scarily so. However, I think the large corporates will stop self-booking. We have definitely seen longer stays through OTAs for smaller companies, brand knowledge. Interesting. Vinny says Airbnb usage will increase. The employee that chooses to use it, reimbursement only, will be fully liable and needs to sign waivers, removing company and RMC at risk.
That's interesting, Vinny.
I mean, I think that's the honest. I think that's what's happening in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like it, but it's happening.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna flip it. And maybe I should put on my Jack voice, right? Well, if this is happening so much, why is it happening? Why are we mad at corporations? And I'm saying mad. I'm using my own words here. But why are we kind of pointing the finger? Actually, Jack had a great one up here. I'm gonna pull that one out here real quick. Why are we pointing the finger at companies and corporations and procurement at mobility departments when the market is speaking and they're saying we want this service? So isn't it incumbent on us as an industry to provide something?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, are they utilizing it? I guess I would ask Vinny this question. Are they going to utilize it more because they're going to more lump sum, and that sort of is their way of cost savings? Because again, I think with the lump sum thing, that's also been cyclical, right? I mean, we've seen it come, we've seen it go, we've seen it come back, we've seen it go. We're now seeing it come back again, possibly post-COVID. Do you think that's based on the ability to easily use technology, Vinny, or is it a cost savings for the corporate client? Or I guess I would ask that question. But it's interesting that that they're having them sign waivers. That's really interesting.
Well, I mean, the waiver thing I think is a start.
Yeah.
Jack says we give certain employee levels lump sum and they can do with it what they want. They don't even have to use it for temp living. Mm-hmm. That is what I was referring to about duty of care. They get to a new location quicker.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that probably is really a sign as well, Ben, that the demographics are changing again, right? I mean, if I were to move, I wouldn't want somebody to give me a ton of money. I would want them to help me. But that's because, I just don't want to do that stuff myself. But if my kids were moving, they'd be happy if somebody gave them a chunk of money and they'd move themselves. I think that maybe that's part of what we need to look at as an industry as well, is how do we need to recognize the demographics of the transferees and the relocatees now to be a step ahead of it in the future.
Well, I think there's two issues. One issue is the changing demographic, right, and lower level people moving more often, which is what
Mhm.
Jack's talking about. And just frankly, there's not a budget for a $20,000 relocation for a $40,000 employee. I
Exactly.
get that, Jack. I mean, I don't like it, but I get it.
Mhm.
Okay, it makes
Mhm.
sense to me. The other is an issue of human nature, and this is an issue I think that we do have a duty of care to combat. The issue of human nature being, hey, want 10 grand over here, new employee, or the next 6 months of pain and suffering, and they're like, give me the 10 grand, right? It's like, well, because it's really hard to wrap our mind. Yeah, pain and suffering. How painful can it be, right? Loading the U-Haul, how painful can it be? Airbnb, can't sleep under the sheets. How painful can it be? Like, what's really the odd? What are the odds, right? And then we do a little brief calculation in our head, tinged with fantasies of new new purchases floating around and being flush with cash. So I think that so and to some degree, I think we have to save employees from themselves because I mean, I just that's my take on it. I don't know. Let's see here. Vinny's saying not cost savings as we are reimbursing the full amount of corporate housing exceptions only if there are no
Oh,
companies.
that's interesting.
Let's see here. Brad's got one. Looks like in response to Jack Champel, if the use of lump sum packages allows your employees to get to the new location quicker, then you are working with the wrong RMC. Oh,
Oh,
this,
Brad's on a roll today.
I love two contrarians talking. Okay, I don't think there's anything more entertaining. Plus, I love both these guys. I think they're both great. Woo! It's good. I wish we weren't. I wish we weren't at the end of the show here. Let's see here. Philip Leonard says legal liability becomes complicated when multiple suppliers and RMCs are involved and issues arise. Another topic: who is responsible?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a
Sarah,
good point.
Sarah, Sarah takes exception. Jack Jampel. Whoa, that's just his new name. Jack Jampel. Whoa.
Whoa, Jack Jumble, whoa.
Really? So you do not worry about where those employees are staying or going? In fairness, I'm sure Jack does care about people. I'm just saying. Tune into other side of the coin to find out. Linda Gerard, I think Airbnb is happening because there's a lot of employees are seeking to be in suburban locations and not traditional corporate housing. Suppliers are changing the inventory models, but will need to increase supply to reduce Airbnb bookings. So, what do you say about that? I mean, just a quick little pivot though about
Yeah.
not maybe about ease of use, but the selection of different styles of properties and maybe suburban properties.
Well, that's an interesting point, and we just experienced this last week. Actually, we got a bunch of requests for a place in upstate New York, which has very few apartment communities anyway, but there's like three of them up there that are decent to set up a unit and do corporate housing in. But when the client made the call to all of these properties, they're usually pretty empty. I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York because of what happened in New York City last year and everybody fleeing the city. Everything up there has doubled in price and it's booked solid until like August. There are no apartments available, nothing's being built. So I think that we're seeing that as well. On the flip side of this is that the people are moving out of the bigger cities, so it's because they do want to be in the suburbs. And I think what that looks like is that we may have to pivot yet again and start to get into maybe renting and furnishing homes rather than looking for your standard apartment in the suburbs.
So you're saying renting and furnishing home, like creating inventory where
Yeah,
it didn't exist.
yeah. Hmm.
How do you so as a provider who operates at the marketplace level? I want to make sure I don't mischaracterize, but who operates kind of at that level. How do you encourage or handle or help create inventory like you just described, upstate New York, larger home, needs to be furnished? I mean, that's seems kind of like a tough assignment.
It is. It's a lot of legwork, I think, at that level. I mean, Owl again is this marketplace that connects a supplier with a supplier. So we are now, or an RMC or a corporate client with a supplier. So on the login page of Owl, when a supplier sets themselves up, they check off boxes whether they have their own. They have to have core inventory. but do they rent homes? Do they rent? Do they own properties? Do they, do they setups all over the country, or do they just have their own core inventory and core locations? So they can identify themselves immediately as to what they have. I have a team of people that work with me that if a supplier is stuck, they will reach out to that team and ask them to help, and then we get involved. But yeah, it's an ever-changing needle. I think that one. We're looking, every day we're adding something else to it. Is it, private condo? Is it a 4-bedroom home, or those types of things?
Wow, this conversation has been so interesting. I mean, we've got almost like 50 people on LinkedIn watching, a dozen people on Facebook till the very end. This is great. I want to give Jack kind of a final word in this side of the discussion, just because I just want to make sure we get Jack right here. Sarah Buck, employees are adults and can make their own decisions. We don't need to hold their hands. But they are entry-level employees, just like we don't provide stock options to everyone. It's based on levels. They're adults. They're just not seasoned yet. They're adults, and they can make their own decisions. And I told Jack I'd give him okay. Wow, and she looked. Jack says, bottom line is we have various level employees. Not even do all employees receive stock options. I don't know, Jack. Awesome. This is great. This is the kind of conversation we need. Cindy's loving this session. Appreciate you tuning in. Elizabeth has some really important feedback and observations as well. So we want to make sure everybody's voice is here. She dodges the liability question, but she comes in with an equally important observation. Appreciate that. No, this is great, Kim. I mean, we had a top 5, but I mean, this right here was what people needed to hear. Good. And I enjoyed this conversation so much and your insights.
You can invite me back anytime, Ben.
I may have to do that, but I want to give you the opportunity to kind of close us out with just maybe kind of a final thought. What's something that we should be kind of thinking about, Kim?
I think that we should be reassessing the levels of service and how we plan to take care of guests on the supplier side, and the expectation of service levels on the RMC and the corporate side. And I think we need to be communicating more. I think that, because of the pandemic and Zoom and nobody can meet each other and all of those things, I think it's become very challenging, and it's easy to shoot off an email that can be misinterpreted. So I think, having face-to-face meetings, and hopefully by the time we're all vaccinated, we can all end up in Chicago in October at ERC. I just think that, we just need to communicate again. We're a touchy-feely industry in that regard, and I feel that we've come away from that a little bit, and hopefully we can get that back as we move forward and progress together.
This was a lot of fun. I agree. We are a touchy-feely industry. I want to hug everybody, shake some hands. Speaking of which, support Move for Hunger out there. Go get a LOVE+RELO tumbler. These are amazing for the summertime. They'll keep your drink cold. They'll keep your hot drink hot. Check out moveforhunger.org/tumbler on the bottom there. Check it out. That was my little effect. But goes 100% of the money, 100%. Nothing goes to me. 100% goes to Move for Hunger. So go check that out. Also, tomorrow we've got Bob Rosing from DwellWorks on. Wednesday we've got Chuck Kuhn, who is the chairman of Cap Relo, as well as the CEO and president of JK Moving. So we got a great week here. But Kim, you really set the bar high. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks. I hope Jack and Sarah kiss and make up at some point.
Yeah, Jack, go kiss Sarah. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your comments. Really, the show is so much better when you guys are commenting in there. The questions were phenomenal. The insight was fantastic. Please keep them coming. Hit that like, hit that little green applause button if you're on LinkedIn right there. Show some love to Kim. All kidding aside, Jack, Vinny, Sarah, Richard, all of you out there, you were wonderful. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And thanks for being good sports as you let me take your words and twist them a little bit just for my own pleasure. No, but seriously, love y'all. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day.